All right, welcome in. We appreciate the diehards who are still here at 4 o'clock. We have a great session for you today. The U.S. Hispanic Council has put together a session featuring 3 tremendous brands, each of them using performance marketing in the U.S. Hispanic market in their own special and different way. Marcy's put together some really great questions. Marcelino Miyares, the managing partner of DDH Partners in Los Angeles, is our host and our U.S. Hispanic Council chair. So quickly, though, we want to say thank you to our education sponsor, Blue Water.
Familia Ramírez.
Deje el drama para las telenovelas.
Pero ahora no tengo que jugar con dolores. Me pongo Gembana y el dolor se va.
So again, thank you to Blue Water for their support. Brand Roundtable, what's working in U.S. Hispanic performance media, and our panel, Nicole Cordero from Los Defensores, Matthew Laramee from Southern New Hampshire University, Tina Watkins from Meaningful Beauty. You guys sat in the right order, amazing. And Marce is going to take it from here. Thank you, Marce.
Okay. Is my mic working? Yep. Okay. So thank you all for being here. When we put together talk about these sessions on the Hispanic Council, we never know if we should talk about how to get into Hispanic, why to get into Hispanic, what's working in Hispanic. And so this year we decided to focus on, for the first time, marketers who are actually in the business and have their own varied experiences. And we hope they're going to answer some fundamental questions, but they're questions that, since we're recording this, we're going to diffuse it as much as we can to try to get as many marketers as possible to consider the market. And why do we have to do this? We have to do this because, despite the fact that if you look at the Gen Z generation, 1 out of 4 people in the United States are Hispanic. Overall, our population is 19%, but in 10 years, it's going to be 1 out of 3. And the market is just moving in this direction. And despite that, only 4% of marketing dollars are getting spent in Spanish, somehow. And you can easily make the excuse that you're going to reach them. I think Matthew used the term, or Tina used the term, Gen Pop. You can reach them with the general market, but that's not the case. And the fact is there's 65 million Hispanics, 2/3 of which prefer to do business in Spanish, prefer to be sold in Spanish, prefer to be entertained in Spanish, and somehow the numbers aren't there in terms of the marketing dollars. So that's why we have 3 marketers here. We're going to talk about why they got into this, how they're doing it, what seems to be working, and let's see what other questions pop up. Just for a couple aha moments, it's easy to talk about the demographics, but most people don't know that 70% of new net homes being purchased in the United States are being bought by Hispanics. 14% of all new mortgages are being bought by Hispanics. 20% of the population, I talked about 20% of the population. The market itself is worth $3.2 million in GDP, 3.2 trillion in GDP. It's literally the 5th largest economy in the world. And if you look at other measures, it's going to be, in 10 years, the 3rd largest economy in the world. It's a monster. And yet, we're only spending 4% against this population. So all of that being said, we'll start with, next please, we'll start with the first question. And I'm going to direct this to Matthew. How did your company come to test the Hispanic market in the first place? And then what convinced you to roll it out once you saw a modicum of success?
So really, at Southern New Hampshire University, we saw it, 1, as a business opportunity for the organization, but number 2, an opportunity for the community to really become first-generation learners in many areas. With that, the market was vastly untapped by higher education, so we wanted to be the voice to be able to create growth and opportunity there, to say you can obtain your degree within a reasonable amount of time at an affordable cost. We initially tested about 16 months ago, and we were in market for about a month and a half and opted to take a step back because we tested and learned that internally within the organization that we had to take a much better step toward creating a good customer experience, especially within our student financial services area, where we didn't have many in-language representatives to be able to communicate when a bilingual potential learner would call in, but as we started to step into the financial aid portion, they would often want to be joined by a family member. Those family members were predominantly Spanish language, so we said, all right, let's pause our media. Let's actually hire the proper staffing so we can communicate with this community. And once we did that, and it was over a period of time, about 14 months, we relaunched this past June. And we've seen really great opportunity because we've been expanding in the marketplace, seeing good, positive results. And we actually allocated for the first time in this fiscal year hard dollars toward the marketplace. And over the last 4 months, while we had set budgets toward it, we started shifting more dollars from our Gen Pop campaign into the in-language campaign because we were seeing great success there. So we're actually over the budgets that we initially planned for, understanding that we're creating growth there. And it's been very successful so far. We're seeing it on the enrollment side and expecting to continue to see that growth throughout the current fiscal year, which goes through June.
And what about you, Tina? Because you came into the market within the last
we re-entered
18
the
months.
market.
Re-entered.
We re-entered. We had to take a pause just after COVID. The offer we had in market it contained a product with an ingredient that the FDA put a new disclaimer on it. You have too much in that product, so we had to take that offer off. And then because of all the uncertainty with COVID, we did not go back in, do a new edit, do a translation, and go through all of that to reintroduce ourselves. So we did that about 2 years ago.
And now you're committed.
We are committed, yes.
Good. Next question. And this is for Nicole. Now, Nicole's in a unique circumstance. She manages a brand called Los Defensores, which is a 100% Hispanic brand. But she is in a company that has English-speaking brands. So I'm not going to ask her why they got into the market, because they got into it 30 years ago, and they're
40.
40 years ago, and they're killing it. So before you were born, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. No, but honestly, if I may, it's an amazing story because exactly it was like the right opportunity at the right time. And what happened was, so we're in the legal space. We're legal lead generations, primarily for personal injury through Los Defensores, which is the #1 legal brand across the country. And so in the 80s, you would have a lot of underserved communities that would go through the legal system. They would sign documents, get prosecuted by the law, and not know what was happening to them because they did not understand English. The legal system is not set up in a way where you can have multiple languages, et cetera. So long story short, our company gets founded and we just celebrated 40 years. And so it's an amazing story for marketers and brands as to how a Hispanic brand can live throughout multiple decades and grow and scale and become a huge prominent business where we're private equity owned. And there's a lot of kind of opportunity still to be untapped. And we just in the last couple of years launched nationally, where we were in California primarily at the beginning of the 80s. So it's an amazing story also of growth to say there's opportunities to grow a brand and a business through the multicultural or diverse communities, or in this case, the Hispanic community. And it has longevity and value long-term versus just immediate return that you see. There's also a lot of long-term growth opportunities there.
Okay. So with that background, let's focus on the media. What media verticals are you running typically in the Hispanic market? Are they Spanish only? Are you targeting Hispanics with English commercials?
Yeah.
And how does that compare with your general market brands?
Yeah, so on the Spanish side, we started primarily on traditional media, so your basic TV, radio, out of home, and print. Then launched digital. Search, huge channel, obviously captures a lot of demand at the right moment, highly converting channel. So search is obviously a very strong channel for us. And we're doing search primarily in Spanish, but we're also tapping into bilingual search terms, different types of questions and queries that people are asking in order to capitalize on that traffic. We're also doing a lot of digital, paid digital, social, YouTube, YouTube's a little bit more challenging. There's just so many opportunities and so much content on YouTube that you do have to find like the right audience, the right type of content, ensure it's within the strategic placement of the content that people are viewing. And then I would say CTV and streaming in general is more of a newer channel for us. But we are primarily leveraging Spanish, and Spanish content is always the best way to reach the audience, because on the digital side, there's a lot of challenges from like a data standpoint to be able to find this audience online. Not all of us select a Spanish browser. Not all of us are setting up our Facebook in Spanish and things like that. So that limits the amount of Hispanics that you can reach. Whereas through Spanish content and advertising on Spanish content, you know you're exactly hitting the right audience. So a lot of traditional media, a lot of digital, and then a lot of streaming, which is, you know, somewhat a combination of digital and traditional.
Is CTV looking promising?
CTV is still in experiment mode for us, and I think primarily just given the cost of entry, right? You know, you have a lot higher CPMs, the challenges that I just described as far as like the audience and the different kind of targeting capabilities there. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. It just requires a little bit more of a longer runway rate than some of us are used to in like the performance side where you're, you know, expecting immediate returns. I think for CTV and streaming, it's just a little bit more of a longer tail.
Learning curve.
Yeah.
Matthew, we were talking earlier, and you seem to be seeing some promise on the CTV side of things. Can you talk about that?
We absolutely are. So when we look at linear versus CTV, we do a cost comparison of our 18 to 34 demographic, and within that space, we are seeing some cost efficiency within the CPMs there, and we've seen a healthy amount of response out of the CTV campaign, leveraging our attribution partner, and comparing that against the general population, with the understanding that our general population campaign has been in market for 10 plus years within linear, nearly 5 years within the CTV space. So we are using that as a barometer for the Hispanic marketplace within CTV, with the understanding that we're still building reach and frequency within the marketplace. So we expect inflated metrics currently, but over time we anticipate those to continue to reduce. And our partners within the CTV space have been phenomenal. They've helped us, provided great feedback on our creative, how to better develop it to reach the audience properly. When we initially launched, we were actually utilizing an English language creative with Spanish language subtitles. That went for about 6 weeks while our creative team continued to develop an in-language creative, which since then, launching the in-language creative, we've been steadily seeing cost per response declines on a weekly basis.
Well, that's a good segue to the next question, if you don't mind. How do you define your Hispanic campaign? And I guess this is for Tina and you. Are you defining Hispanics by their language, by their culture, by the percentage population where they live? How are you thinking about Hispanic as a campaign?
Sure. So really right now we're focusing as in-language, placing within content, as you know, Nicole, that is Spanish language content. Over time, though, we do anticipate through ad serving with our ad serving partner in the CTV space to start carving out more culturally relevant creative to the different regions of the country. Right now we are running full national with kind of more of a broad approach, but fortunately we recently worked with a partner on a Hispanic language creative symposium. And what was indicated is the broader approach isn't shunned by the community. It's understanding that there are multiple touch points across the United States where the communities do vary, but they are still one community, although they have different focuses from their country of origin. But as we continue to develop, we want to be able to focus on certain regions of the country that are more relevant to add that specific cultural relationship to the areas that we are delivering the creative to.
And Tina?
So our Hispanic campaign right now is primarily long form Spanish. We didn't take a direct translation of our English campaign. We were very conscientious of customizing the current long form that we had, taking some of our testimonials out and making sure that we had the proper representation of the audience that we're trying to reach. That was very important to the success of what we did. And once we had the long form down, we took that to 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and hopefully our next step will be the CTV.
Okay. This next question is going to be for anyone on the panel, because you all are very vested. Tina, you're in long form. You're in traditional media. Nicole starting to experiment with online, and then you're definitely in CTV, and then supported with broadcast. So, as it relates to the general market, where does the Hispanic seem to perform better or less than better when you compare the funnels, top of the funnel, middle funnel, conversion? Where is it what are the differences that you see between the way Hispanics are reacting to campaigns and general market?
I'll add here for some of the things that I've seen, but even just in my experience, I think channels like linear TV still remain relatively strong amongst Hispanics. You have still less diversification in terms of there's not as many networks and as many content, and things like sports, especially soccer, are pretty concentrated and dominated still through these linear TV networks. So you see a lot of that. So I would still say a channel that might experience more decay or more fragmentation on the general market, might be more active on Spanish, would be linear TV as well as broadcast radio.
And with that, we are seeing success within the linear space, absolutely. But again, with our core audience being 18 to 34, they're much more adaptive to the CTV space. So we are seeing very strong response there. And it's through a few different modes. We typically drive to just our standard snhu.edu website across the board, but we also have QR codes included within our creative. And we're actually seeing better response in the Hispanic market for QR code response than we're seeing within the general population as far as the number of scans per 1,000 impressions delivered.
So let's go to the next question. Perfect segue. You're Mr. Segue today. We'll start with Tina. We know you were using QR codes in the campaign. How are they performing relative to the general market?
So I'd say we're seeing the opposite effect. We don't see as many scans and orders on our QR code in the Hispanic community as we do in our English campaigns. Our English campaigns do very well. However, like I said, our main focus is a long form. And in general, the U.S. market does not scan and order as much in the long form off from the QR codes. They're still dialing the phones and connecting with us that way. But it is still a great entry point. It gets them to a website that they can go ahead and explore from there.
Yeah, for us, it's interesting because we see a lot of scans, a lot more scans than we would in the general market. But we don't see as many conversions. So they're scanning, so certainly they're interested, they want to know what's behind that QR code. But then from a performance standpoint, the conversion, we're still seeing conversions happening via phone call, given the nature of our business, and then also just converting on form fills and websites off of the QR code. But the scans are there, just not the conversion from there.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And really from our perspective right now, since it's not just a time commitment, but also a financial, we tend to see a 3 to 6, even up to 18-month conversion window when we see initial response from a lead entering our CRM. So we still haven't hit that, what is that conversion point yet for us, but we are learning, and whatever we can do to amplify it, especially as we develop and learn more with our web team, to be able to say, what can we do to analyze and operate our website better to create better conversion over time? That is certainly in consideration. So it's still advancing, and we're learning within that space.
And we're also an older demo. We're 45 plus is our target. So to get someone, to be scanning a code at that stage is sometimes part of the battle. They'd much rather pick up the phone.
Yeah, it's not in any of the questions, but since the title of the show is What Works in Spanish, we're still finding across all of our Hispanic campaigns that inbound call centers play an important role in the marketing mix in general. So QR codes and CTV, we're testing all kinds of stuff that drive people online. And in fact, there are more, for most products, there are more online orders than there are phone orders, but it's still at a critical mass. The phone call, particularly for the 45 an older demo is pretty critical. Okay, so let's go to the next question. I think it's number 5. No, it's number 6. So this is for those of you who are still buying linear, which is all of you. How do you trace back orders that come online? How are you dealing with the attribution issue in Spanish?
For us, it's really with our partner within the attribution space to determine cost per response. But as far as direct search, we are seeing our paid search increase specifically with the in-language users coming into the site. But again, we're not capturing necessarily the demographic data right at the lead form fill stage. So what we are seeing is over time, as that demographic information is captured through the enrollment process, we are seeing that increase over the last few months. It's still baking out, but we anticipate those numbers to continue to increase as we develop reach and frequency within the marketplace. Again, considering that we've been in the general market for so long, we have to allow it to really mature and determine what is that long-term forecast that we'll see for the growth.
So you're using paid search as sort of a barometer, lifts and page search as a barometer to what might be driven by your in-language.
Absolutely, and paid search is our best barometer for success within a campaign because we know that they're exactly searching for Southern New Hampshire University. Organic search, they could be searching for a business degree for a 4-year university online, so it's not as clear and concise because, of course, there's marketing efforts being drawn across the marketplace. We like to think that we're creating top-of-mind awareness as well since we do have such a strong presence within linear and CTV, but as we continue to see that grow, the goal is to see Southern New Hampshire University as the primary search.
And Tina, you have a robust online business. How do
that's what
how
I was
do
going
you
to
guys?
say. We're very much paid social added on top of all of our TV spends. So we have such a high baseline of our web activity already. We just have to attribute it with spikes to large airings that we can tie back timing-wise.
Yeah, we're doing a similar thing as you guys. We're looking at lift on branded paid search. So, how does that tie into? We see some waterfall also on unbranded, but that's a little bit harder because there are some other things that are happening. But we're still refining our attribution and trying to determine what that allocation should be, what the right mix is, because at the same time, we have a lot of different levers that we're pulling on the search side. So sometimes it's hard to attribute that back to like linear campaign activities versus efficiencies that we found or changes in bidding strategies and whatnot. But there's definitely a correlation there, specifically with branded search terms.
Okay, next. Next slide. We've already talked a little bit about CTV, so let's not focus so much on that part of the question, but what has surprised you about the Hispanic market? Have there been any aha moments in your journey?
For us, it's been the QR codes, honestly. Just seeing that increased scan rate, and again, as you noted, our demo is a bit younger at 18-34, so that adoption rate is much higher than you would see in an older demographic. But the beautiful thing is, like, everyone in this room has used 800 numbers at one point, I'm sure. The QR code is the closest thing that you're going to get back to an 800 number to say that this property is generating leads for me. Now we can follow that through the funnel and see how the conversion goes.
Tina?
I would say the co-viewer. We see a lot of generational now at this point. Oh, my mom used that skincare product. It's still around. It's doing great. I'm going to go ahead and try that. So I think that's very interesting. The brand is now celebrating its 20th anniversary, so that alone is a testament to its success, and to have that full circle is really, I think, helps keep the customers coming in the door or on the phone or on the web.
Mm-hmm. And you, Nicole?
I think for us, some of the newer ones, I would say YouTube and TikTok both from the paid and the organic side. So we're leveraging a lot of social, paid and organic, and still being able to tie even through the organic initiatives, just conversions and lead generation from that as well. So those are two big channels that we see as tremendous opportunity of growth.
Okay. Next, please. So this is always sort of an existential question when we're pitching clients, because we pitch that Hispanic is going to be incremental. Is an incremental play. It's a strategic play. It's not tactical. It's not zero sum. All these things. So, have you found that in your case, obviously your entire business is incremental, but
Yeah. But I've pitched Hispanic in the past, so yeah.
Yeah, so you know the feeling.
I know
the
what
feeling.
that is. Yeah.
Do you feel that that Hispanic as a strategy has resulted in incremental revenue, business opportunities for your businesses?
Absolutely. It was, like I said, we had a pause from it for a couple of years. So when we brought it back, and we just were able to keep our spends at a level that there have been some shrinkage in the marketplace, in the U.S. marketplace for long form advertising, and when we've been able to make up the difference with what we can find in the Hispanic marketplace. So it's been filling a void that has been really a great addition to what we had going. So if we can add to it, if we can add the CTV to it, if we can add the podcasting to it, it's just an ad, an ad, and an ad.
And for us, it certainly has. We're tied to every investment that we make, so if we aren't seeing that incrementality with our investments, we have to determine why it isn't creating that. But that doesn't. If we see a lull in it, that just means we're learning, creating opportunity for growth within those areas to figure out how we do create that greater incrementality. And since we are still in our infancy stage, only really pressing into the market in the last 5 months, although we did start testing about 16 months ago rather, we will continue to see that growth, especially as the awareness is gained within the marketplace and the trust is built within our university, because there's very few universities within the space right now. So there's not much opportunity to see representation within the community of people actually achieving their goals within higher education. So I personally feel that as that continues, people within the marketplace will continue to say, I can do this, and we'll see that incrementality grow from there.
And the last question related to part of what you were saying, how does this impact your budget allocations? Do you see it, Hispanic versus general market, as a zero-sum game? Do you see Hispanic, because of its incrementality, as opportunities to spend more in order to generate more? How, sort of philosophically, how do your companies address this?
So I'm happy to start here. So entering the current fiscal year, we set a level budget of a certain total of our overall budget, and we've actually been exceeding those weekly budgets that we were anticipating because we are seeing that growth within the space. And we're just at the beginning. Right now we're tapping just a handful of resources, but there's so much opportunity for growth within the marketplace as we continue to evolve and really seek out new opportunities. I know earlier you mentioned focusing on Spanish language content, but as the data evolves, if we can find areas where they're consuming English language English language content, but still present them with Spanish language creative, it makes a great deal of sense because they're not just consuming content in one place. One thing that has really come up in a symposium recently is the 200%er, someone who identifies 100% as American, but also 100% Hispanic. So we want to reach them in all areas across the content that they're consuming.
Yeah, it's definitely takes a good portion of what we want to allocate. We've now been back in the space for a bit of time now, so we can look back historically and say, well, we've spent this much, it's driving this much extra for us, so next year let's do X plus X, or however that might be, and it might cause us to reallocate away from another lesser performing channel in some degrees, or we go and we say, let's just add more and do as much as we can, or shift our spend from the back half of the year into the front half of the year. Things of that nature, just shift it to the better performing time of the year.
Can I paraphrase what you just said, that if Hispanic is generating more business, it's helping you spend more in the market in general?
Exactly, yeah.
And is there, if you look at your English brands and your Hispanic brands, is there any?
Yeah, so we see things like quality as something where, sometimes in the e-commerce world, you could see higher order average value or things like that, where because perhaps it's less competitive, because there's less choices, less brands that are willing to commit to do it the right way with the right messaging, build that trust, represent, the consumers in their content. I think it tends to create this sense of loyalty. So we see that happen across how we measure quality. And so we see a higher quality when we're looking at our Spanish business versus our general market business. And then I think just other things are this aspect that you mentioned, like generational kind of passing on, which is just this word of mouth where you build this loyalty. And so most likely you'll be referred to other members of our community, of our family. We're big families, we're very close to our families, so there's a lot of this word of mouth that happens and referral opportunities. And so we see a lot of that too, where we hear people calling on behalf of someone else or wanting to contact us with someone else, or even within them, they're saying, you should call these guys, you should connect with these guys. So I think as you build a lot of brand trust, loyalty and quality come to the forefront of that, compared to what we see on the general market side, a little more transactional, a little less of that like referral, long-term building.
Loyalty is
extra
important.
value.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
super
loyalty is
important.
very
And
important.
and you win it, and they're there, for a lifetime. So
Yeah.
pretty.
Had we
pretty
just
valuable.
taken our long form or any of our length of commercials and just done a straight translation, I don't think the trust would have been there.
Yeah,
I think that would have been more disrespectful,
yeah.
and it would not have been taken on such a good level.
And we don't have reoccurring. We're like a one-time situation, but we still see it in those like referrals and connections, and just how, I remember these guys from like watching the telenovelas with my parents, and now we're like speaking to different audiences and different generations. So there's a lot of that too.
And to that end, authenticity within the creative is so essential. It's easy to speak at the audience, but to speak to them is very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Matthew, I don't want to knock what you're doing because it seems to be working, but you brought up Spanish language content from a streaming perspective. But I want to sort of fact check a little bit for the audience that the majority of current Spanish language speaking viewership in streaming is going to English language content. Right? So there's a new dynamic where you can watch a movie or a series on Hulu in English, but you can choose to watch it in Spanish or subtitled. So the streaming dynamic has opened up a lot more content to Hispanic, which for generations has been limited to 3 players: Televisa, Univision Televisa, Telemundo, and Azteca for a while, and they're not around anymore, and Estrella, I guess. So Spanish language content is important, and it's probably going to continue to grow, but the general market's English language content is capturing the majority of Hispanic viewership right now, the streaming audience, right? And but they still want to see their commercials in Spanish, right? So to the extent that we can fish in that lake with a lure that reaches Hispanics in Spanish, that's going to be the way to go for a long time.
The only challenge there, we did an experiment with Hulu recently where the challenge is, how do you know that they're Hispanic and you serve them with the ad? That's the biggest challenge. Is like, we all know, I mean, I'm Latina, I mostly consume media in English, and the brands can't find me. And the problem is that because I don't set up my whatever smart TV is not set up in Spanish, I don't have anything set up in Spanish, I fly under the radar from that perspective. There's some behavioral things that trigger and say, oh, she's Hispanic and whatnot, but the challenge is that. And so I think it does require the technology, the way that they're finding these audience to advance. And I think there's so much underrepresentation data-wise of who is a Hispanic person or consumer, that it becomes very tricky. And so how do you avoid those wasted impressions with serving ads to people that are not the audience, and ensure that you're not alienating them as a result of serving them the incorrect ad?
Right.
And so I think, you're spot on, but we need the data providers to advance on how they're trying to classify who is.
Yeah, and it's not universally
Yeah.
defined. So we work
Yeah.
with Roku and Samsung.
Yeah.
Samsung in particular knows how many viewing hours are going to Spanish, to Univision or Telemundo, so they can set a threshold and say this is likely a Hispanic audience, a Spanish language audience, and then you can target ads. And Roku has a similar model.
Yeah.
I don't know if Univision, I would imagine that Peacock/Telemundo would have that ability because they have both universes.
Yeah.
But that's really going to be key, I think, to CTV success for us. And that Spanish language commercial in an English language program has that much more impact.
Yep.
And we've actually worked with Univision as we've worked with their VIX product, and they plant their flag in their device graph to be able to identify the in-language speakers at the household level, and then identify the mobile ID based on the IP address at the household. So they're using their device graph very heavily and tout it very much. So we've been fortunate to work with that team and kind of see the inner workings of how they're developing the device graph.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you guys want to add anything else, but that we ran through our list of questions and then some bonus content. I don't know if you have any questions.
All right, we got one.
Thank you. Hey everyone, that was really great. My question, everyone was talking about QR codes. Have you all leveraged action ads and the ability to just send a message through the operating system in the TV? And if you have, how is the response rate for that?
We have not utilized that yet. We are still developing our QR code information. While we have tried the interactive ads with our Gen Pop campaign in the past, we did see some lighter success there, but with that, the marketplace has evolved quite a bit since we last did that. So I think there's opportunity in the future to certainly test it and see if we can create action to drive to those email addresses and capture information, and then have information go directly to those who have opted in at that point.
Yeah, we've also not experimented that, and I know there's just continuing changes with like TCPA and all these things around, reaching, and we're heavily regulated, so we don't have any experience in that yet.
Yeah, we'd just be dipping our toes into it in the English space, and if it doesn't work in the English space for us, we don't expect to try it in the other marketplaces yet.
Hey guys, thanks. We learned that 4% of the digital or the marketing assets are going towards the Hispanic demographic. As that continues to grow, are you currently challenged in finding vendor partners that support Spanish, i.e. call centers, media agencies are obviously covered, fulfillment, customer service? Have you experienced any of those, or do you foresee challenges supporting the Spanish media?
So I think for us, although we do have a disclaimer within our creative that says all courses are in English, at the end of the day, it's a very heavy lift for the university with so many programs still being taught in English. In the current state, perhaps in the future state, we'll begin having classes in language, but for now, we do continue all in English. That could be a challenge for us, as some may prefer to adopt within Spanish language courses predominantly.
Yeah,
Yes.
our biggest challenge is definitely at the call center level. Once we get the caller on the line, they run through the sale, and then we hit a brick wall. They don't have a credit card. They don't have a form of payment. I don't understand why they called if they don't think they can pay for it. But that is probably our biggest challenge, and how to reconnect with that customer after the fact. After they've dropped out because they don't have a payment that we can take. Or they don't understand that they can use a debit card instead of a credit card. So things of that nature is definitely very challenging for us.
Yeah, that 4% number has been 4% for 3 decades. So there's definitely something, and this is an overused word today, but there's definitely something systemic in the way Hispanic campaigns evolve in companies. I don't think they deploy the same ecosystems in general, and even when they're finding success. I think Matthew's company is, I think you're manifesting a level of commitment that is fairly rare. I mean, your company is completely dedicated, and Tina, I know you're doing everything that you're doing in Spanish in the general market, right? So, but generally, there's an infrastructural thing, and it could be bandwidth, Could be lack of vendors, lack of quality vendors.
Yeah.
It could be any number of things.
I was going to say that too, Marce, is also just the quality of the vendors and the service that they provide, because I mean, we see this in our business often where, so we have all of our call center agents are in-house, and we'll get a lot of like, yes, I'm bilingual, but it's very different to, you grew up speaking Spanish, maybe in your household, then like handle a call, handle a sale, handle, disputes or whatever that is. And so I think also tremendous opportunity on the vendor side to really build those capabilities with high quality. And I think they often tend to be like a second consideration, but I get it. It's like a chicken and an egg, right? You need the business to build it. You need the other side to build that. So it requires some level of commitment, knowing that you might not hit profit right away, but the clients will come if you set the vendor infrastructure the right way.
Anyone else? Nope.
I have kind of a related question to the last one. And I know, you can't get up on a panel without being asked about AI, but are you using AI because of a different market that you're targeting in different language, different creative today, or do you feel that would be part of your future strategy?
Well, from a creative perspective, we know there are people in our industry that are starting, particularly in dubbing, right? So if their strategy is to dub a long-form show or a short-form show into Spanish, they're using AI to sync better. Not necessarily a better product, but at a syncing level, it does work. I know that Blue Water does a lot of, well, actually we saw it, they do a lot of AI. It's still very stratified, right? So to be able to do AI right, you need to be able to license really expensive software. For smaller agencies, smaller producers, it's not as accessible. Digitally, it's being used a lot in Spanish, because you can take all of those 20 ad sets that you produce a month or a week, however your volume is. It's a lot more efficient to do it with AI, and it's happening a ton. And you can. Sometimes it's done very well, but sometimes you can feel it. You can feel that this is just doesn't feel natural in some way. So I think it's permeating our industry as much as it would be in the general market. I don't know if you guys are using it yet.
We're using AI and experimenting a lot with AI. We're using it like operationally and tactically for things like asset management, project management, all that kind of good stuff. But then also doing it to leverage creative experimentation, just more rapid, iterative versions of call to actions, of changing backgrounds. Because sometimes in CRO, a color drives 5% better response or whatever that is conversion. So we're using that to just accelerate some of our learning and our process. And then we're using it to generate content, especially web content and things. The only thing that I will say with Spanish is it still requires someone to go through and vet that. It's not quite fully ready where you don't need any kind of human interaction. That's at least our experience, with the Spanish side. But it allows to just kind of get things faster, used for translation, at least for the first pass. But then you're having, your subject matter experts more editing instead of building from scratch. That's how we're leveraging it.
And similarly with our creative team, they're using it very much to storyboard and really create better opportunities to have different iterations of that and how it may play out on screen once the final product is produced.
And I think on our side, we're probably just more on the telemarketing side. Just in the general, as soon as the call hits the call center, AI can help route it to a better agent to help them along with, do they want a bilingual? Do they want a English speaking? Do they want to finish the transaction in Spanish and such?
Anyone else? Last chance. All right. How about a round of applause for this group? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marce. Well done. And